So the last video was me painting the motor. It's been a couple of days and my piston rings did come in, so I've been going around and gapping the piston rings. So I will give you guys a look at what I've been doing. I made a little chart so I could see what the ring gaps end up being. Yeah, I did hone the crap out of this thing, so maybe a little bit looser than the factory spec, but it should be fine since we're going to be turbo and everything. I'm struggling right now to figure out how I want to actually orient the rings, the compression rings on the piston. I found a couple of different diagrams, but I'm not really sure I like the one that Honda gives, because it, like, all the oil control rings are all like lined up. So I'm not a big fan of that, but I'll show you guys what the block looks like. So what I've been doing is actually throwing the rings into the bore itself, and I push it down a set amount. And the chart that I made over here on the wall says it's got my first ring top and bottom for cylinder number 1, and then second ring top and bottom. So your first ring you generally want to be tighter, and then the second ring you want to be looser, only slightly looser in my case. I'm probably not going to file them if I don't have to. I'll probably just leave them where they're at. So yeah, I got to go through and do the rest of them, but I did do cylinder number 1 and I got it all set up. So here it is. Here's the piston. It's got the rings on it. So you put this springy ring on first on the bottom, and then you throw one of these on either side of it. These are the oil control rings right there, and the other one's the spacer. But yeah, so that's on, and then I throw the compression rings on as well. I have the lower compression ring, which is the big thick one, that's on, and then on the top you throw the first compression ring. And something else to note is these rings do have markings on them. They've got little ends. Let's see if I can show you. They're way easier to see on this compression ring, on the top compression ring here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, I can see it on this one. So there you go. You can see the N on there. That's the first compression ring that goes on top. And on these, there's also an N, except it is harder to see. I'm assuming you won't be able to see it on camera just because it's so difficult. But yeah, take my word for it. It is on there. So you want to set up the ends. They always are going to face up. Any sort of marking that you have, these are NPR piston rings, so they're Nippon Racing piston rings. So the end faces up. Any sort of ring you have, the marking is going to always face up on the piston. So the set distances that I've been pushing it down into the bore, I have this oil control ring set up here on this one piston. So what I'll do is put the ring in the bore, the first compression ring, and then I'll push this down until the oil control ring bottoms out on the top of the block, and I know how far it's pushed down. And then I take my feeler gauge, which is over here. I have another one too, but take the feeler gauge and you try to slide these guys into the end gap, and you see which ones you can fit in there, and that's telling you what kind of piston ring end gap you have. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a compression ring in the second cylinder here, and I will show you guys what my gap is. So you can see the little end on there. I did my first compression ring, I put it in the bore, pushed it down with the piston, and now I'm going to grab my feeler gauge and see what kind of gap I'm looking at there. Hopefully you guys are able to see while I hold the camera, but this guy right here is just fitting in there, kind of gets stuck a little bit, but that's kind of exactly what you want here. As you can see, I got the feeler gauge in right there, just barely fits. It's pretty snug. You can slide it in and slide it out. Just barely fits. And that is actually a 16 thousandths feeler gauge. So the top ring on this one is a little tighter, 16 thousandths. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that, and then I'll push the piston ring down and I'll measure it at the bottom of the bore as well. So I was able to do all of the first and second ring, first compression ring and second compression ring at the top and bottom of each of the 4 cylinders. So we got 19 thousandths, 19 thousandths, 20 thousandths, 20 thousandths for the first ring and second ring in the cylinder number 1, and so on and so forth. A little tight here, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, I like that. It's pretty good. So looking at it, the factory service spec is like 8 thousandths to 14 thousandths. So honestly, that's fine. Looking at this, the service limit is 24 thousandths for the first ring, 28 thousandths for the second ring. So honestly, we are all within the service limit, and I did want to gap them a little bit bigger for boost. So it looks like I don't even have to touch them. We're looking great. So now all it comes down to is how I actually orient the rings on the pistons themselves. I found a couple of different ways that people do it. This is the way that I like the best. I drew a little diagram, but this is the intake side right here of your piston. So you got your first compression ring, which is that top ring. You face it this way. You don't want anything facing the wrist pins, where the wrist pins point, or where the thrust is, because you know the piston moves back and forth in the block from front to back a little bit when it's thrusting because of the crankshaft, you know, swaying it side to side kind of. So this area and this area, you don't really want the rings. You also don't want them where the wrist pins are directly on the side because they can scratch or whatever. So first compression ring, we put it here. Second compression ring is 180 from that, and then we go into the first oil control ring right here, and then the oil spacer is right here because that doesn't matter too much because it's under the first compression ring, and then we look at the second oil control ring is over here. So I think that is probably the best way to do it. I've seen them before where they do like you know, up here they do like first compression ring, second compression ring, and then over here is like 15-degree angles from each other. First oil control ring spacer, and then the second oil control ring, and they're like all in the same quadrant. I just feel like that's asking to burn oil. I mean, I guess it probably works. That's what Honda wants you to do. That's what my Haynes manual says, but I don't like that for some reason. I mean, I just don't think that that is a good idea to put them all right next to each other with the gaps together. So I'm going to gap them like this. I think we're going to be just fine. I went ahead and did one already. Let's see if I can show you guys. Here's piston number 1. I tried to make it easy for myself by writing on it with some Sharpie and some Expo. So you can see right here we have the gap for our first oil control ring right there. And then if I spin this thing where this green is, you can see there's our second compression ring gap. Oh, I moved it a little bit. I can set these up again later. And right there is our lower oil control ring gap. Right here is our first compression ring gap, or that should be there, and then right here is our oil control ring spacer gap. Or no, that's that's in line with this because it's the first compression ring gap is down there. So yeah. Anyway, that's how I decided to set everything up. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys, and yeah, so that's what I'm going to carry on doing. And with that being said, I don't see any reason why after I get home from work tomorrow I can't assemble the bottom end of this motor. I think we should be ready. Just gotta get some assembly lube, and we can throw the crank in, cradle on top, and then put all the rods and pistons in, and the bottom end of this thing will be assembled. I'm just gonna get my hands on a head gasket and prep the cylinder head itself. The cylinder head, I'm gonna make sure I check the valve guides. I think I'm gonna change the valve stem seals just on cylinder number 2, just in case. You know, just in case. And then, yeah, I'm ready for the major reassembly here. Actually going to be assembling the bottom end of the motor, so I'm pretty stoked about this. It's been a long time coming. So I've been just ringing the pistons like I was in the previous video. I have a couple more left to do, but we don't really necessarily need to do that in order to put the crank in. So that's the first thing that I'm going to do. So I've got the motor here, and what I just did was actually wash the whole thing with soap and water. I did hone it, and that's going to make little pieces of metal go all over the block, and you know, just anything that may have found its way into the block. So went outside, washed it, rinsed it, blew it out with an air gun, and then wiped everything out. So it's really clean now. It honestly looks really good. I'll show you guys what it looks like in here. But yeah, it's super clean. I'm excited. This thing is ready. It's ready to go together. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and show you the process. But I think first things first, I'm going to take my assembly loop and I'm just going to put it on all of our bearings in here. Just load it up really good, and then I'm going to put some on the crank as well. And I've already wiped both of these things down and make sure that I got my plastic gauge off. I'm not sure if it's okay to leave it on there, but you know what, I don't want anything on the bearings, so cleaned it off. I used WD-40 to clean it off. I figured that can't hurt. And I cleaned off my cradle assembly too. So basically just going to throw EOS engine oil. It's like a supplement. It's what GM uses for assembly lubricant. So I mean, you can use whatever you want, Permatex, or you know, there's all different kinds of assembly lubricants. They're all going to do basically the same thing, but I'm going to load everything up, drop it together, and then I'm going to go ahead and start torquing the cradle bolts down on the crank, and then I'll move on to doing the rods. So I've got my block right here, and like I said, everything's all nice and clean. I'm about to throw my rust washers on. They're kind of giving me a little bit of a problem with falling off. This one seems to stay on okay, but this one wants to fall off. It's just because of the tilt of the actual motor itself. Hopefully it doesn't fall now. Seems like it's going to stay. It's going to stay for me. Alright, good. So I'm going to go ahead and get my engine assembly lube right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour it on this journal here. A little extra. Isn't going to hurt. I'll spread it out in a sec. Kind of being generous here. Okay. Go ahead and get it all over our bearing. Want to make sure it's nice and coated. My thrust washer too, a little bit. Alright, so we are pretty well coated and we're ready. I think we're ready to drop the crank in. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to put some more on top. Alright, and that might be a little too much, but can't hurt. We want our first startup to be nice and oiled up. We don't want to have any dry parts or anything like that. Now I'm just going to spin it over. Spins great. Alright. That's beautiful. Okay. So we're ready to throw our cap on. I'm going to go ahead and oil that up too, off camera, and then I'm going to come over and place it on. torque down 2 steps, 22 and then 54 foot-pounds. And this thing spins like butter. You can spin it with 2 fingers, so that's pretty good. Doesn't feel like there's any spots that are any more difficult than any others. Spins really freely, so I'm happy with that. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and throw all the rest of the rings on all the pistons, and then we can go ahead and get the pistons thrown in this thing. So I've got the motor flipped over right now, and I'm ready to start shooting the pistons in. I already did throw number 2 in, so just want to rotate the crank to make it somewhere where it's going to accept your piston. So this one I've got facing up, so I'm just going to take a little bit of lube and put it on the actual crank down there, just right where our rod bearing is going to sit. And I've also got our rod itself right here, and I taped off our bolts so we don't damage our crank when we're putting it in. But I'm going to go ahead and, whoa, that's a lot. That's fine. So we're going to go ahead and get this guy all lubricated, and then I'm going to take you over to the bench and show you our piston ring compressor and what we're going to do with this guy. So we're over on the bench here, and I checked my gaps to make sure that I matched it to my diagram up there, and the ring gap's matching up pretty good on this. So what I like to do is just dunk this whole thing here in motor oil, and so we make sure that we got it nice and coated. And then I have our ring compressor here that I already sort of pre-fit to be the correct size. So I'll show you guys how that works. That's just going to slide over the top of the piston like so. Try not to move the position of any of the rings while we do so. And I just want to go on about, a little more than halfway. And then we'll set this down here, and we'll take our little square tool and hold it, and we can crank this down on the actual piston. And what that's going to do is make sure that our rings are compressed in there. And so now we can go ahead and fit this. So I'm going to take this guy over to our number 1 slot, and you want to make sure that your arrow on your piston faces towards where the timing belt is and where the timing part of your engine is. So I will take that over, and I'll show you guys what it looks like over here, what I'm doing. So over here, we are just about ready to go ahead and tap our piston down in the slot. So I've got my hammer here, and what you want to do is hold on to your ring compressor. Just tap this down all the way. You can see we had it a little uneven there. Tap this down, make sure it's nice and solid, and then you just want to go ahead and tap your piston, and if it gives you any resistance or anything, then you're going to want to stop. So I've been having a couple of problems with it. It doesn't seem to want to go down. We're going to give it another shot. Hopefully I got it cranked tight enough this time. But yeah, I got it placed on there. So we're just going to tap it down, and it looks like we got it down that time. So we just had to be a little more forceful with it, but we're down now. So I'm going to go ahead and spin the block over, and then I will, go ahead and make sure it fits around our crank good. Throw the rod cap on and torque it down to 34 foot-pounds, and I'll do the rest of them just like that. But I'll show you guys how I go ahead and torque down the rod bolt nuts. So you can see right here, there's my cap. I found that putting the piston on is best when the crankshaft is facing this way, with the journal like in this direction mostly. But then after you actually get the rod and the bearing onto the crank, I turn it till it's like facing this direction, and then it's easiest to get the rod on underneath this bar in the cradle, because this thing's kind of annoying. Not all Honda motors have this cradle. I know like the B series doesn't, and I'm sure some other ones, but cradle's kind of a pain when it comes to doing rod bolts and stuff. So yeah, not too bad though. So I like to keep it spun in this orientation, then I can get through here to this rod nut here and then through this to the other cap nut. So yeah, not too bad. 34 foot-pounds. Gonna do that right now, and then we will go ahead and do the other two. I'm already halfway done, and then yeah, that's what I'm gonna call it for tonight. I think that's gonna be enough assembly for tonight, but I'll be happy with that. This is some pretty good progress here. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys how I do these rod nuts here. I got my torque wrench set to 34 foot-pounds, so I'm just going to go just until it starts registering, and then I'm going to move on to the other one, just so we can try to torque these evenly. And then once it starts registering, we'll take this one to like 20 foot-pounds, and then we'll take this one to 20 foot-pounds as well, and then we'll take it past maybe to like something like 30 or almost 30, and then we can take this one all the way to 35 or 34 rather, and then we'll take this one to 34, and then I'll go back and just check it again. Got a little more turn out of that one, and some more out of that one. So I feel confident that they're both at 34, and we're ready to move on to the next one. So I think that is going to be it for this video. I did get the rest of the pistons in and all the rod caps torqued down. So we were looking at one assembled bottom end. So the whole bottom end is basically assembled on this thing. I mean, I gotta do some things like throw on the oil pickup, and there's a gasket right here. I got one of those coming for the for this guy. Not that it matters that much, but got a new one. Yeah, this guy I got to reseal. That goes on the other side where the clutch and everything goes. Obviously, all the timing stuff has to go back in, and then yeah. Still tons of stuff to do, but I'm waiting on some parts now, and everything should be in soon, so hopefully we can keep going on this project. But yeah, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it, and yeah, hopefully next we'll be doing something with the engine bay. I'm looking to get some paint coming for this thing pretty soon, because I'm going to hit a roadblock if I don't paint it. So that's the next project, I think, is to paint this thing. So yeah, it's moving along. But stay tuned and subscribe if you'd like to stay updated and see more. But yeah, have a good day.